Welcome. This one here, this webinar is going to be kind of just the basics of the Tool SAI program. It's one of the drawing programs that you can use, kind of like Photoshop, but more focused on just the drawing aspect and not so much the like photo editing that you can do in there as well. So with the Tool SAI program, you can literally get it. It's just painttoolsai.com. Or System X, I believe, actually. And then it's a pretty affordable program compared to Photoshop. It's a one-time payment of $50, and you actually get Tool SAI, and then there's a version 2 as well. I specifically use the version 2, but they look pretty similar in the way that they run. So starting with the program here, it's like I said, it's a pretty simple program. A lot of comic book artists use this one. So up top, you have your basic windows up there. I'm going to go through right away. We're just going to go to New. We're going to open up a new canvas. So here you can rename these. If I can spell. So I'm going to name it Webinar. So you have presets here. So you can enter in your own size for the canvas that you're going to draw on, or you can use one of the presets. The A4 preset is a really good one to use. Otherwise, a lot of the times personally, because I like to print my art, I will go to inches and I will do an 11 by 17 because that's the general size that art prints that I like to do are. Now, when you do your printing resolution, I would recommend not going under 300 pixels per inch if you want to print your images at all. By doing this, it's going to give you clearer lines, more crisp drawing, and that allows you for like resizing your image and making sure that your image doesn't get too compressed or too pixelated. So we have our new one here. Going through the top here still, back into File, you can open. There's Recent, so you can see which ones have been opened recently. If you're working on the same drawing and you just want to quick access it, obviously save. You can export them, JPEGs, Photoshop, just kind of however you want. You can also do that in Save As well. So you can actually go down and change which file type you want to save it as. I don't usually save them as JPEGs until I'm completely done with the image because it compresses it and you'll get rid of all your layers. So if you need to go back and edit it, not real easy to do that. So if you go into Edit up here, once you start doing some stuff on the program, you can do Undo. There's a Redo, and then you can also cut, copy, paste, and select all. There's also other ways that you can access those, so I don't use this section a whole lot, except for maybe like select all, but you can use your basic keyboard shortcuts too. So Canvas, you can change your resolution. So let's say you decide you want to just change the resolution of the entire canvas here, change the width, height, your resolution, just kind of like when we open a new one. You can also change the canvas size. So this won't readjust the size of your image. This will just cut the canvas down. So if you're trying to maybe get rid of some white space that you ended up not using, you could use the change canvas size. But if you are trying to resize your entire image, you're going to want to use the canvas resolution. The ones I use the most in this section here, honestly, are just the reverse canvas, horizontal and vertical. That's just going to flip your image. So that's really helpful to see like if your image is kind of aligned the right way, what it looks like flipped so it doesn't look weird. And then you have your layers up here. So you have your new layer, line work. Line work layers are for like your line art. It'll just kind of give you crisper lines, a little bit easier to draw on if you're just doing line art. I don't usually use a line art layer, I just keep the normal one. You can erase your layer, merge layers. A lot of stuff in this one I don't actually use because there are other ways to do it in the program. There's other buttons you can use. selection, deselect, invert. So if you're trying to like resize a portion, so like I can go and select, so then you can invert your selection and stuff like that. And then you'll be able to move it around and everything. Moves the whole canvas. That'll move just your selection there. So you can see where I had it selected. Ruler, I don't really use the ruler too much. You can show hide the ruler. That actually helps you draw a straight line. So if I go back on the brush, it'll actually just draw along that line there. And then if I hide the ruler, I've got a perfectly straight line. So that's super simple on that one. Filter is something I use a lot after I've already had like my drawing done. You can adjust the hue and saturation. So if I go over to, I'll use her, and then I'm going to adjust, it's hard to see because I have a lot of layers over here, but right now what's selected is like the dark part of the image here. So if I go to color adjustments, hue and saturation, that is going to kind of change the color of whatever is selected on this layer. So this layer is just her dark shading on top of everything. So it's just kind of adjusting that color. Saturation is going to make it either brighter or darker in that red tone that I kind of have being used there. And then luminous is going to be if it kind of glows or if it's pretty dim. I kind of wanted like a red tone in this image, so I didn't go super dark. Make it nice and warm. So if we go back, and then you can also do brightness and contrast as well. So if we do that one's pretty simple. Again, that's kind of just like your luminous there, your contrast. They don't do a whole lot when there's not a whole lot of different colors. This one makes it kind of orangey almost on the depth. Then we have view. I don't use a whole lot in view. Again, there's other buttons that you can use there. So if you're zoom in, zoom out, rotate canvas. These will open up the other, because I have some down here that are already open. These just change to them. Your window here. So this is what the program looks like right when you open it, when you download it. You can go through and edit it as you like. It's automatically going to have pretty much everything on the user interface panel, which is these guys right here. I like to go to the separate user panel, and I like to separate the Navigator panel, which is this little guy down here. And then I like to separate the layer panel. And then I actually like to move both of them onto the right side of my screen. Now this is different for everybody. It just really depends where you like your settings. This is just kind of how I usually have it set up, because then you can adjust like how wide it is. The Navigator you can make a little bit bigger. So that's that one. Otherwise, I don't really use a whole lot in here. I've noticed a lot of people that use the Tool SAI program, they don't really go through and like adjust a lot, except maybe these panels, just because the system's really good at like the base setting, but there's definitely a ton of stuff that you can adjust in there. This will just kind of make everything a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller. And then in help, there's not a whole lot that I use. Shortcut keys are really good, especially if you're using like a drawing tablet that has the hotkeys on it, because then you can set up different things to different hotkeys and then go into your tablet settings and program it to one of the buttons. And then you can do pretty much anything that you can do in the program. You can set to a hotkey. And then options and system ID. Your system ID, you're only going to use when you're registering your product. So when you purchase it and everything. Now, if we go through, we're actually going to go through this little top bar right here quick. It's pretty simple. You've got your undo, redo here. You've got your zoom in, zoom out. This will restore it back. If you hit that little square, it just restores it back to fit screen. This one is rotate. So you can rotate your image here. Again, press the square, it's going to go back. Flip your image. And then my favorite, the stabilizer. So the stabilizer is a lot of fun, because if you have it on 0, let me get a bigger brush here. you can get kind of shaky in your lines. You can see a little bit there. But if you turn the stabilizer on, I usually go into the 15. If I'm doing line art, I will jump down into these guys. It just helps make a really straight, smoother line. Now the thing with that though is there is a little bit of a delay when you're doing it. So I usually don't go past 3 when I'm doing my line art just because of that delay. But it's not like a super bad delay, especially when you're doing line art and you want to draw slow anyway. So for coloring, I usually stay in like the 10 area because it still helps make your lines clear, but it doesn't really have much of a delay in it. And then that's just to draw a straight line. So then if we jump over to the Navigator panel over here, or not the Navigator, the color swatch panel. The main thing up here, I usually just keep it on the square and circle. So obviously this will change like if it's gray or if it's more of a bolder color, and then if it's got more white in it or more black in it. And then you can obviously change your hue, so you can change which color you're going to use there too. If you add in, so if you press this little button up here, this is your RGB. So if you want to add in less red, more red, or less green, more green, less blue, more blue, you can go through and adjust your colors that way to kind of figure out what you like. If you look right here, that's where my color adjusts, so I can see which color is selected there too. Get rid of that one. So this one is your HSB. So again, you can change your hue here, you change your saturation there, and then you change whether you want it more black or more white there. This one is really fun because you can take, so let's say I want to use this purple. I just press in that little square there. And then let's say I want to use, we're going to use like this greenish color. And then this will give you actually pretty much any color in between it. So if you're doing shading and stuff like that, you can see which colors complement pretty well by doing that. And you can do it with really like any colors going on. So that one's a lot of fun to play with. I do use that one once in a while, especially if I'm trying to mix colors. This one will save your colors. So if I'm using this kind of golden yellow, I can go here, you right click, and then you just register color. Normally I have it set up to have like the skin tones that I use the most or the hair colors that I use the most, and then I add in like the shadings for it and the shines, all my highlights and everything. That way I just have them easy access depending on the character that I'm drawing. And then this one will actually give you like a test. So I still have that line set. So you can kind of just test the brush and see if you like the size or like the color before you go ahead and draw on your program. Your undo, redo there, you can erase it, change your brush size up here. So for a lot of these, there's a couple different ways that you can like do the same thing. So just kind of whichever one is easiest for you. Going into here, you have your square select. So you can select that and then you can move it. You have your lasso tool. So if I just want to select one part of it, you can go through and just select the one part. You can cut, copy, paste it, move it around, do whatever you want. You've got your magnifying, so that's zoom in, zoom out. Your wand tool, so that's if you want to like select the whole thing and then invert it, kind of like I did earlier. Rotate, shapes, so you can do like squares, triangles, circles, your basic shapes there. Makes it easy if you need to add some like specific shapes and you don't want to draw them. Your hand is just your grab, so it'll move the canvas around, which you can also do in the Navigator panel over here. So again, just depends which way you like to do it. Text, if you want to add in text, it'll bring up all your fonts down here. You can change the size if you want it bold or italic, or obviously the color you can change up here. And then lastly, your eyedropper tool here. I have mine set to right click as well. So you don't always have to select this, you can program it, but it just picks up whatever color is underneath the eyedropper there. So when I'm doing shading and stuff, I like to use that because then I can go through the darker and the lighter colors and just kind of add in the shading there. And then if you go down here, this is your brushes. Paint Tool SAI comes with just some pretty basic brushes, and most people that I've seen really don't edit these too much. So like the one I've been using is just your regular brush, kind of like a paintbrush. It will, let me get a little bit bigger one so we can see. So you've got your brush there. Now this one actually, it blends a little bit. So if I go and use a yellow now, you can kind of see if I pick up the red, it'll just kind of blend through. So it's got some blending to it. Now you can adjust all of these by using this here, which I'll go through like a quick thing with it, but it's really just kind of play with it and see what you like. Obviously you can change the size of your brushes. This is if it's got more of a square tip or a fine point tip. The fine point tip does make it a little bit more blurry. It's not quite as solid, so I usually stick in like the middle area. You can do your minimum size, and that's going to be like this part right here. So if you want to not have that taper on the end, you do that. I like the taper. I think it makes the lines look more interesting myself. And then your density, so it's just how bold your lines are, if they're pretty faded. And then your minimum density is going to control that taper there again. So if you have it down to 0, it's going to be pretty light. And then if you go up to 100, you'll see it's much darker, not quite as contrasted. You can change the sizes of your brush if you want, the texture. So if you want to have like a canvasy look, it's hard to see at that size. That one doesn't show too much. I usually don't change the texture too much. I like to just use that with the brush. But then you also have, if we go back up to the brushes here, you've got your pencil, obviously smaller lines, doesn't really blend the colors. Your airbrush, a little bit more blended, a little bit more airy. And again, you can adjust it if you want it lighter or darker. It's usually the same settings on pretty much everything. Your water tool has a little bit more of a sharp blend to it. So if I'm blending these two colors, it's just a little bit more rich. I do use watercolor quite a bit myself. Marker, pretty basic. Your eraser, which obviously you'll probably be using a lot. Select pen and select erase is like if you want to select this area and erase it, or color inside the lines. So now I can go back to the brush and it'll just color where I selected, or I can invert the selection and it'll color like in the middle here. Select eraser, same thing. So if I go through, it'll erase like what's in between those two lines. Your bucket, change the color. Binary kind of gives you like a, almost like a, let me get a bigger pen. It doesn't have any fade to it or anything, it's just really sharp lines. Good for line art. Again, I like to have a little bit of fade in my line art. And then you have the gradation, which gradiates. So then we're going to go back to the brush and kind of keep. So you have your blending. I don't mess with these a whole lot. Your blending, dilution, and your persistence, that just kind of changes, again, what the end to the middle looks like there. If it blends in with the colors around it, you can kind of see right there, I picked up some of the white. So that's what those three kind of adjust there. And then your blur pressure. Down here is just another way to select your colors, or your size, sorry. And then jumping over here, these ones are super simple. You've got your navigator where you can move, you can scale in and out, and you can change the angle. You can also do that with these buttons. And again, press the squares to revert back. Now your layers is the other thing that I use the most. You can see if I jump back to this one here, I have a ton of layers. I learned that if you're doing anything new or trying something new, always do it on a new layer, because then you can just delete it. You don't have to worry about messing up your picture. So with the layers, you can actually change the modes. So we're going to go back. We're going to keep using this one, so the darker that we used earlier. And I'm going to go through and just change the mode of this. So right now I have it on multiply. If I put it on normal, it doesn't quite give me that like shady look as much as I was looking for. So that's why it's on multiply. It just kind of like darkens. I also have the opacity lowered. So if you lower it, obviously that won't show up at all. That'll make it really dark. So I have it lowered just a little bit, just to kind of give me that shading I was looking for. Screen makes it brighter. Overlay kind of just adds that color over top whatever's below it. Shade, shine, do exactly what you'd think, but it makes it a little bit more saturated, a lot more hue to it. Burn makes it really dark. Dodge doesn't really do a whole lot, in my opinion. I don't use dodge very often. Color burn, linear burn, those are going to make it look pretty black. Darken color, same thing. Lighten you can do, just kind of lightens the area there. I don't really use any of those. Soft light, hard light, vivid light, really kind of similar to the same thing. It's really just kind of mess around and see what looks. There's so many times that I sit here and I just go through all of these to see which one I like the best. The only other one that I use a lot is Luminosity. That actually, and it doesn't work very well on a dark color, but if you look at like the sun over there or her eyes, I used Luminosity, especially right here on any of my highlights. That just kind of gives it this really, really bright color to it. So I'm going to lower my brush a bit just to kind of show you. We're going to go create a new layer, going to create it in Luminosity. So it just kind of brings like some light into, makes it look a lot brighter. And then if you go through, we already talked about opacity there. You can lock the layer. So locking the layer is going to make sure that I can't color on it. So now I can't, we're going to actually go back to this one because that's got something on it. Psych. So lock locks out anything outside of what's drawn on the layer. So I've already got a little bit on that one. Let's go to her hair. So if I lock her hair layer, now I can't color on anything other than the hair layer there. So if you're trying to do your shading, I use lock all the time to make sure that I can't shade outside of it. Another way that you can do that too, to make sure you don't shade outside, if you create a new layer on top of your layer. So I'm gonna start my shading, let's say on top of the hair here. Create this new layer and then go to clipping group. Clipping group is gonna clip to whatever colors are on the one below it. So now again, I can't go outside of the hair that I've drawn. So clipping tool is super useful. That's what I use in like all my kind of stuff. Change protections, I don't really use that one. That one moves the layer around, and that one locks the layer, so you can't make any changes to it now. So when you're done, lock the layer. I don't, because I like to live dangerously. I don't use selection source very much, so I'm not super familiar with that one. Obviously, you've seen me click this one a couple times. This is your new layer. That's for a new line art, line work layer. So if you're working on just your line art, it's going to help make it look a lot more crisp. New folder. So I actually have this one here. I have a bunch of folders in this one. I actually decided to organize my life. So you've got the line art layer here. So there's my line art. I've got the hair. So those are all my layers for the hair. Dress, all my layers for the dress. So it's an easier way to organize it if you want to keep organized so you don't have to sit here and like figure out which layer you use certain things on. These ones are, I'm going to go to one that will, let's go to that one, I guess. So if you use these ones, you have transfer and merge. Transfer is going to take what's on this layer and move it down a layer while keeping this layer here. It'll just make it blank. So if I transfer it down, you don't see a lot there, but you see that the sun went away here because it's down on this layer now. And then if you do merge, it'll actually just merge the two of these. So this one goes away and combines with that one. So then you can just merge them and it does basically the same thing, but you don't have a layer on top anymore then. Erase layer, so that'll erase everything that's on the layer, and then trash. So if you need to delete it, like we'll go delete this blank one that I did, just deletes it. Pretty simple there. So those are like the base tools. There's like a mask tool that a lot of people use too, but I really don't use it that much, so I'm not super familiar with it. Again, there's a million different ways that you can do the same thing. So then when it comes to the basic drawings, like that's kind of the base of it. It's really just play around, figure out what you like. The main stuff I use, honestly, I use the brush and I use the water. The watercolor is really good for like if you're trying to blend to do your shading. You can kind of see there, so I'll usually use that for shading. But other than that, I mean, myself, I use the basic simple stuff because there's so many things you can do with it. You really don't need to go around. You can see now that I've pressed harder, you've got your green in there. Otherwise, it just kind of blends the two colors together. But yeah, that's really the basics to Paint Tool SAI. It's not super complicated. I feel like Photoshop took me quite a bit to get used to, whereas this program, like you just mess around a little bit and you're good to go. These ones that I had pulled up, I had done these in Paint Tool SAI. So you can kind of see there's what my line art would look like on the line art layers, and then just different styles that you can do. So all of this was done in Paint Tool SAI. Like I said, there's a million different ways that you can draw, and it's just kind of whatever you feel the best with or that you want to mess around with. So that's really all I had for this one. Were there any questions or anything, or was that pretty easy to follow along? Looks like we might have a hand raised.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. I was wondering, I'm actually used to GIMP, and so
Go ahead.
It just said I'm muted.
Nope, you're good.
Oh, okay. I'm not actually muted. Okay. That's weird. Sorry, I'm still getting used to Zoom too.
That's
so,
okay.
I was wondering, is there any way to set the image so that it's grayscale, like you can only work in grayscale and not accidentally throw color in there if you're trying to work entirely in black and white?
Yeah, so you can adjust the hue. I don't know if there's a quick way to do it, to be honest. I don't usually go through the grayscale too much, but you should be able just to go to your hue and then just lower the saturation. And then when you're done, you can go back.
Okay.
So that's the easy way for that one.
Fair enough. I had another question, but I forgot it because that was the important one. So.
All right. Well, thanks for your question. All right. So if that is all, I think we are just about out of time. Thanks for coming in to see this one. And again, we're always here at DoSpace, so go ahead and hit us up on our website where we've got our chat going if you guys ever have any questions. Thanks for coming in.